The heady scent of fresh basil caught Riley Sanders' attention as she arranged the artisanal produce display at Evergreen Market, her nimble fingers working quickly despite the exhaustion from her double shift. She never expected that the herbs she so carefully arranged would become the first thread connecting her to a man who would change her life forever. "Those look exceptionally fresh," a deep voice observed. Riley looked up to find a tall man examining her handiwork. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and he wore a simple white t-shirt and jeans that somehow looked expensive despite their simplicity. "Just came in this morning," she replied with her practiced customer service smile. "We get deliveries from local farms 3 times a week." "Perfect," he said, selecting several bunches. "Gene's been complaining about the quality at other stores. He's rather particular about ingredients." Riley nodded politely, wondering who Gene was. "Your personal chef," she joked. The man's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Actually, yes. Though sometimes I wonder who's in charge, him or me." Riley felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "Sorry, I didn't mean to assume." "No offense taken," he said, extending his hand. "Blake Donovan." "Riley Sanders," she replied, shaking his hand briefly before returning to her work. "Let me know if you need help finding anything else." Blake wandered through the store, filling his basket with an assortment of produce, occasionally glancing back at the auburn-haired woman who had returned to arranging vegetables with surprising artistry. There was something captivating about her focused expression, the way she bit her lower lip in concentration. For Riley, Blake was just another customer, albeit a handsome one. At 28, she'd been working at Evergreen Market for 3 years while trying to finish her degree in environmental science. Dating wasn't even on her radar between work, classes, and her mountain of student loans. Blake returned to her counter with his selections. "Gene will be pleased," he said. "He's been searching for decent produce since I moved here." "How long have you been in Portland?" Riley asked as she rang up his purchases. "Just 2 months, still getting my bearings." "Well, welcome to the neighborhood," she said, handing him his change. "We're open daily from 7 to 8, except Sundays when we close at 6. "Good to know." Blake's smile lingered as he collected his bags. "I'll be back." Riley watched him leave, thinking nothing of the encounter beyond appreciating a pleasant customer interaction, a rarity on busy Saturdays. The following weekend, Blake returned. Riley was sorting through a shipment of local apples when she spotted him examining the citrus display. "The Mayor lemons just came in," she called over. "They're exceptional this time of year." Blake looked up with recognition lighting his eyes. "Riley, right?" she nodded, surprised he'd remembered. "How did the basil work out for your chef?" Gene was impressed. He's French and rarely impressed by anything, so that's saying something. Blake selected several lemons. "He's making something with duck tonight that apparently requires these." "Fancy Saturday dinner plans?" Riley asked, immediately regretting the personal question. "Just testing recipes for an event next month," Blake replied. "Though I admit I'm a terrible taste tester, I'd be happy with a burger most nights," Riley laughed. "I'm the same way." After a long shift, cereal sometimes counts as a gourmet meal. Blake glanced at his watch. "Speaking of food, it's past lunch. Is there a good place to grab a bite around here?" "Maggie's Cafe across the street makes amazing sandwiches," Riley offered. "The turkey avocado is my personal favorite." "Thanks for the recommendation." Blake hesitated, then added, "Would you like to join me? If you're on break soon, that is." Riley blinked, taken aback by the invitation. "Oh, I actually have another hour before my break." "Another time, perhaps," Blake said smoothly, not seeming bothered by the rejection. "I'll try the turkey avocado in your honor." As he paid for his purchases, Riley noticed his platinum credit card and the expensive watch on his wrist. Probably some corporate executive, she thought. She'd encountered plenty of well-off professionals who shopped at Evergreen Market for its organic, locally sourced products. After Blake left, her coworker Tara sidled up. "Who was that? He couldn't take his eyes off you." "Just a customer," Riley dismissed. "His chef shops here." "His chef." Tara whistled low. And you turned down lunch with him? I'm working, Tara. Besides, men like that aren't interested in market employees except as a diversion. You don't know that, Tara protested. Not all rich guys are jerks. I don't even know if he's rich, Riley countered, though the evidence suggested otherwise. And I'm not interested in finding out. I've got midterms next week. But despite her protests, Riley found herself thinking about Blake's kind eyes and easy smile throughout her shift. It had been a long time since anyone had caught her attention like that. Blake returned the following Saturday, and the one after that. Each visit included pleasant conversation and subtle flirtation that Riley pretended not to notice. He always came alone, always on weekends, and always seemed genuinely interested in her recommendations for both produce and local attractions. 3 weeks into this routine, Blake arrived carrying 2 cups from the high-end coffee shop down the street. I noticed you drink the house blend from the break room, he said, offering her a cup. I thought you might appreciate an upgrade. Riley hesitated before accepting. Thank you, but you really didn't have to do that. Consider it a thank you for all your excellent recommendations. Jean is thrilled with the quality of everything I've brought home. Riley sipped the perfectly brewed latte. This is delicious. I was hoping, Blake began, that you might have time for that lunch today, or dinner perhaps. Something in his hopeful expression made Riley's usual excuses fade away. I actually finish at 3 today, Blake's face brightened. Perfect. There's a new restaurant on the waterfront I've been meaning to try. I should warn you, Riley said, suddenly self-conscious, I'll be coming straight from work. I'm not exactly dressed for anywhere fancy. Blake glanced at her simple uniform of black pants and a green evergreen market polo. You look perfect to me, and it's not that kind of place anyway. Casual, I promise? Riley agreed to meet him at the restaurant at 4, immediately questioning her decision as soon as he left. She barely knew this man, regardless of how charming he seemed. She messaged her roommate the restaurant details and Blake's full name, just to be safe. At 3:30, Riley found herself fussing with her appearance in the employee bathroom, wishing she'd brought a change of clothes. She freshened her makeup, let her auburn hair down from its practical ponytail, and changed into the spare blouse she kept in her locker for emergencies. The restaurant, it turned out, was indeed casual, a converted waterfront warehouse with industrial chic decor and spectacular river views. What Blake hadn't mentioned was that it was also one of the hottest new openings in the city, with reservations typically booked months in advance. How did you get a table here? Riley asked as they were seated at a prime window spot. I know the chef, Blake replied simply. We went to college together. The meal was extraordinary, with dishes that made Riley forget her initial nervousness. Blake proved to be an attentive listener, asking thoughtful questions about her environmental studies and seeming genuinely impressed when she described her thesis on sustainable urban farming. That's actually fascinating, he said. I've been looking at investments in vertical farming technology. The potential impact on urban food deserts is remarkable. Exactly, Riley found herself leaning forward enthusiastically. The combination of reduced transportation costs and fresher produce could transform communities with limited access to healthy foods. As they talked, Riley realized Blake never mentioned his own work. When she finally asked directly, he was surprisingly vague. Investment management primarily, he said. Rather boring compared to what you're doing. Is that what brought you to Portland? Partly. I was looking for a change of pace from New York. The quality of life here is better, and there are some interesting business opportunities. Before Riley could inquire further, Blake's phone rang. He glanced at it apologetically. I'm sorry, I need to take this. It's my sister. While he stepped away to talk, Riley gazed out at the river, trying to make sense of her feelings. Blake was undeniably attractive, intelligent, and kind. But something about him remained guarded, as if he were holding part of himself back. When he returned, he seemed distracted. Family situation, he explained. My sister's having some trouble with her son's school. Nothing serious. The rest of the evening passed pleasantly, but Riley sensed a subtle shift in Blake's demeanor, a return to the polite distance of their early interactions at the market. He insisted on driving her home, his luxury SUV confirming Riley's suspicions about his financial status. As they pulled up to her modest apartment building, she felt a twinge of embarrassment. "Thank you for dinner," she said, reaching for the door handle. "I had a really nice time." "Riley," Blake said, stopping her, "I'd like to see you again, properly, not just at the market." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. "I'd like that too." Their second date was a hike in Forest Park, where Riley discovered Blake was refreshingly down to earth despite his obvious wealth. Their third was a cooking class where they both failed spectacularly at making soufflés and laughed until their sides hurt. Through it all, Riley maintained her guard. Blake clearly came from money while she was working her way through school and living paycheck to paycheck. Their worlds couldn't be more different. "You're overthinking again," her roommate Zoe observed one evening as Riley agonized over what to wear for their fourth date. "The guy obviously likes you. Who cares if he's loaded?" "I care," Riley insisted. "I don't want to be another conquest for some rich guy slumming it with the help." "Has he given you any reason to think that's what this is?" Riley reluctantly shook her head. Blake had been nothing but respectful, never flaunting his wealth or pressuring her in any way. The doorbell rang, ending their discussion. When Riley opened the door, she found Blake holding a small potted herb garden. "I thought you might like to grow your own basil," he explained with a smile, "since that's how we met." The thoughtful gesture touched Riley deeply. Maybe Zoe was right. Maybe she was letting her own insecurities cloud her judgment. Their evening at a local jazz club was magical, with Blake's hand warm in hers and the music creating an intimate atmosphere. When he kissed her goodnight at her door, Riley felt herself falling despite her reservations. The following week brought a cascade of midterm exams that kept Riley from seeing Blake. They texted daily, his messages providing welcome breaks between study sessions. On Friday night, exhausted after her final exam, Riley was surprised by a knock at her door. Blake stood there with a bag of takeout from her favorite Thai place. "I thought you might be too tired to cook," he said. "No pressure to hang out if you need to crash, but I wanted to make sure you ate something." His consideration nearly brought tears to her tired eyes. "You're amazing," she said, pulling him inside. They ate on her second-hand couch, Riley gradually relaxing into the comfort of his presence. When she fell asleep against his shoulder halfway through a movie, Blake gently covered her with a blanket and let himself out, leaving a sweet note on her coffee table. The next morning, Riley arrived at work to find Tara practically vibrating with excitement. "You didn't tell me your boyfriend is Blake Donovan," she accused in a hushed voice. Riley's brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Tara thrust her phone into Riley's hands. On the screen was a business magazine article featuring Blake's photograph beneath the headline. "Donovan Ventures expands to Pacific Northwest. Billionaire Blake Donovan sets sights on Portland's tech scene." Riley stared at the phone, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The article detailed Blake's career as a venture capitalist, whose early investments in several tech unicorns had catapulted him into the billionaire ranks by age 32. It mentioned his recent move to Portland and speculation about potential investments in the region's growing tech ecosystem. "Billionaire," Riley whispered, feeling suddenly lightheaded. "That can't be right." But as she continued reading, the pieces fell into place: his vague descriptions of his work, the chef, the easy access to impossible restaurant reservations, the casual way he spent money without ever drawing attention to it. "You honestly didn't know?" Tara asked incredulously. "Riley, the man has a Wikipedia page. We never really talked about his work," Riley said weakly. "He said he was in investment management." "Well, that's technically true," Tara laughed, "like saying the ocean is a body of water." Riley worked through her shift in a daze, replaying every interaction with Blake through this new lens. Why hadn't he told her? Was he testing her in some way? Or maybe this was all just entertainment for him, dating a regular person like some kind of social experiment. By closing time, Riley had worked herself into a state of hurt and anger. She was about to leave when Blake walked in, smiling as though nothing had changed. "I thought I'd catch you before you left," he said. "I have tickets for the symphony tomorrow night if you're interested." Riley crossed her arms. "Shouldn't you be too busy for that, running your empire and everything?" Blake's smile faltered. "You saw the article." "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" Riley demanded, keeping her voice low despite the store being nearly empty. "I'm still the same person you've been getting to know," Blake said carefully. "My financial situation doesn't change that, doesn't it?" Riley countered. "You let me believe you were just some regular guy with a good job." "I never lied to you, Riley. Lies of omission are still lies, Blake. You're not just well off, you're a billionaire. That's kind of a significant detail to leave out." Blake ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his expression. "This is exactly why I didn't tell you right away. People treat me differently when they know. They either want something from me or they assume I'm some entitled jerk who's never worked for anything. So instead you decided to test me, see if I passed your little authenticity check." "No." Blake's voice rose slightly before he controlled it. "I wanted you to know me, not my net worth." "Is that so wrong?" Riley felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I need some time to process this." "Riley, please, I'll call you," she said firmly, grabbing her bag and walking past him toward the exit. Outside, the autumn rain matched her mood, cold droplets mixing with the tears she could no longer hold back. She declined Blake's offer to drive her home, choosing to walk despite the weather, needing the time to sort through her tangled emotions. At home, Riley resisted the urge to Google Blake, knowing it would only make her feel worse. Instead, she called her sister Rachel, who had always been her voice of reason. "So he's rich," Rachel said after hearing the story. "That's not exactly a character flaw, Riles." "It's not about the money," Riley insisted. "It's about the fact that he kept something so fundamental from me. What else isn't he telling me? Did you ever directly ask what he did for a living?" "Yes, and he said investment management." "Which is true," Rachel pointed out. "Look, I get why you're upset, but try to see it from his perspective. Dating must be a nightmare when people are more interested in your bank account than who you are as a person." "I wouldn't have cared about his money," Riley said quietly. "He knows that now." "But he couldn't have known that when you first met. Give the guy a break." After they hung up, Riley stared at her phone, at the last text Blake had sent earlier that day, "Looking forward to seeing you tonight." She typed and deleted multiple responses before settling on simple honesty. "I'm hurt that you didn't trust me enough to be honest about who you are," his reply came almost immediately. "I trust you more than anyone I've met in years. That's what scares me." The vulnerability in those words made Riley's anger begin to dissolve. They texted back and forth for hours, Blake finally opening up about the isolation of extreme wealth and the genuine connections it had cost him. "I've been burned before," he wrote. "People who seemed to care about me but really just wanted access to my connections or my money. I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid of losing what we were building." By morning, Riley had agreed to meet him at a quiet cafe near her apartment. When she arrived, Blake was already waiting, looking uncharacteristically nervous in a simple sweater and jeans. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat down across from him. "I'm still processing everything," Riley admitted, "but I want to understand." Blake took a deep breath. "My parents were wealthy but not extraordinary. My father worked in finance, my mother in art curation. I was fortunate to have a good education and opportunities, but the level of success I've achieved came later, through work and some lucky investments." He described how his early investment in a college friend's tech startup had paid off beyond anyone's expectations, creating the foundation for what became Donovan Ventures. "The money changed everything," he continued. "Suddenly people from my past resurfaced, Childhood friends became investment pitches, and dating became a minefield of ulterior motives. Riley listened, her heart softening as Blake described a particularly painful relationship with a woman who had been secretly documenting their life for a tell-all blog about dating a billionaire. After that, I became extremely private, he explained. When I moved to Portland, it was partly for business but mostly for a fresh start, a chance to make connections based on something real. And then you met me arranging, Basil, Riley said softly. Blake's smile was genuine. You didn't know who I was and you didn't care. You were just passionate about the produce and kind to everyone who came through your line. It was refreshing. I understand why you were cautious, Riley conceded, but relationships need trust to work. You need to be honest with me moving forward. Absolutely, Blake agreed earnestly. No more half-truths or omissions. I want you to know all of me, Riley, the good and the bad. And I want to know that you really see me, not just some idealized version of a normal person. I see you. Blake reached across the table for her hand. I see your dedication to your studies, your kindness to difficult customers, your passion for environmental justice. I see how you double-check that elderly customers have everything they need before they leave the market. I see how you light up talking about sustainable farming. I see you, Riley Sanders, and I'm falling in love with every part of you. The declaration took both of them by surprise. Blake looked momentarily panic-stricken, as if he'd revealed too much too soon. Riley squeezed his hand. I'm falling for you too, she admitted. And that terrifies me for a whole new set of reasons. Such as, we come from completely different worlds, Blake. I'm a part-time market employee and full-time student with massive loans. You're, well, those are circumstances, not barriers, Blake insisted, unless you want them to be. They agreed to move forward honestly, taking things one day at a time. As autumn faded into winter, their relationship deepened. Blake introduced Riley to his small circle of trusted friends, including Jean, his French chef who turned out to be a jovial man in his 50s, who immediately took Riley under his wing to improve her cooking skills. Riley introduced Blake to her family during Thanksgiving, a chaotic, loving affair in her parents' modest home that Blake declared was the best holiday he'd had in years. December brought new challenges when a photo of them at a charity gala appeared in a local society publication, triggering a flurry of interest in Blake Donovan's mystery woman. Riley's social media accounts were suddenly flooded with follow requests from strangers, and a particularly persistent reporter actually showed up at Evergreen Market asking questions about her. I'm so sorry, Blake said when Riley called him in tears after the reporter's visit. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. It's not your fault, Riley assured him, though she was shaken by the intrusion. I just wasn't prepared. Blake arrived at her apartment that evening with comfort food and a practical plan to increase her privacy settings across all platforms. His matter-of-fact approach helped calm Riley's anxiety. This will die down, he promised. Something more interesting will come along and they'll forget about us. Is this what your life is always like? Riley asked, the reality of dating a public figure finally sinking in. Not always, but occasionally. I've learned to keep my private life private, which is why most people didn't even know I'd moved to Portland until that article came out. As they worked together to adjust her privacy settings, Riley had a moment of clarity. This is why you were so upset when I found out who you were through that article. You didn't just want to see if I liked you for you were trying to protect me from this. Blake nodded slowly. Partly, though I admit, seeing if you liked me for me was definitely part of it too. As predicted, the media interest faded after a few weeks. By Christmas, Riley could visit Blake's stunning riverside home without photographers following her. The first time she'd seen his house, a modernist structure of glass and stone nestled among trees with breathtaking views of the Willamette River, Riley had been overwhelmed. Now, it felt almost like a second home, though she maintained her apartment, valuing her independence. On New Year's Eve, Blake hosted a small gathering of their closest friends. As midnight approached, he pulled Riley out onto the terrace overlooking the city. "This past year brought me the greatest gift I could have imagined," he said, taking her hands in his. "You've shown me what it means to be truly seen and accepted for who I am." "You've done the same for me," Riley replied. "I never thought I'd find someone who supports my dreams the way you do." Blake had recently established a scholarship fund for environmental science students at Riley's university and provided seed funding for her to develop a pilot program for her urban farming initiative. He'd been careful to do so in ways that empowered rather than overshadowed her work. As the city erupted in fireworks celebrating the new year, Blake kissed her deeply, then whispered against her lips, "Move in with me." Riley pulled back slightly, surprised by the request. "Are you sure? We've only been dating for a few months." "I've never been more sure of anything," Blake said. "I love waking up next to you when you stay over. I love seeing your textbooks scattered across my kitchen island. I love how you've turned the sunroom into your study space. I want that every day, not just on weekends." Riley bit her lip, considering. "I need to finish my degree first," she said finally. "4 more months, then yes, absolutely yes." Blake's smile was radiant. 4 months it is. Spring brought the completion of Riley's degree and her official move into Blake's home, which they began to redecorate together, blending his minimalist aesthetic with her more eclectic style. Riley started work at an environmental nonprofit, insisting on making her own way professionally despite Blake's offer to fund any venture she wished to pursue. "I need to do this on my own terms," she explained. "Your support means everything, but my independence matters too." Blake respected her decision, though he couldn't resist using his connections to help the nonprofit secure additional funding through his philanthropic foundation. Summer found them traveling first to New York to meet Blake's sister and nephew, then to Italy, where they explored small coastal villages far from the usual tourist paths. In a tiny restaurant overlooking the Mediterranean, Blake dropped to one knee and presented Riley with a simple but stunning emerald ring. "It matches the color of your evergreen market polo," he teased. "The one you were wearing when I first fell in love with you." Riley laughed through her tears. "I can't believe you're proposing with a reference to my work uniform." "It's where our story began," Blake said, suddenly serious. "With you arranging Basil and me pretending I needed that much produce every weekend just to have an excuse to see you. Wait, you didn't actually need all that stuff?" Riley asked, momentarily distracted from the proposal. "Jean was baffled by how much Basil I kept bringing home," Blake admitted with a grin. "He finally told me to either ask you out or find another market because our kitchen couldn't handle any more." Riley shook her head in amazement. "All this time I thought you were just a really enthusiastic cook." "I'm really just enthusiastically in love with you," Blake replied. "So, what do you say? Will you marry me, Riley Sanders?" Employee of the Month, environmental scientist extraordinaire, and the only woman who's ever seen me as just Blake. "Yes," Riley answered without hesitation, pulling him up for a kiss. "But on one condition, anything. We get married at Evergreen Market, right in front of the produce section." Blake laughed. "Jean would have a fit about the food safety violations. How about the rooftop garden instead?" "Deal," Riley agreed, snuggling into his embrace as they watched the sunset paint the Mediterranean gold. They married the following spring on the rooftop garden of Evergreen Market, which Blake had secretly purchased and expanded into a showcase for urban agriculture techniques, implementing many of Riley's thesis ideas. The space combined a traditional market below with a working educational garden above, becoming a model for sustainable urban food production. Riley continued her work with the nonprofit, eventually becoming its director, while Blake focused his investments increasingly on sustainable technologies and businesses. Together, they established a foundation supporting environmental education in underserved communities. When their first child arrived 2 years later, a daughter with Blake's dark hair and Riley's determined spirit, they named her Sage, a nod to the herb garden that had first brought them together. Jean, now more family than employee, insisted on preparing all her baby food from scratch using produce from the market's garden. "Remember when you thought I was testing you?" Blake asked one evening as they watched sunset from their terrace, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. "I was so angry," Riley recalled with a smile. "I couldn't believe you'd hidden something so huge from me. In retrospect, I should have told you sooner," Blake admitted. "But part of me will always be grateful for those first few weeks when I was just a guy buying too much basil, and you were just the beautiful market employee who caught my eye." "We were never just anything," Riley said, leaning over to kiss him softly. "We were always exactly who we needed to be to find each other." As darkness fell over Portland, they sat contentedly together, the market that had brought them together visible in the distance, its rooftop garden glowing with sustainable solar lights, a beacon of the unexpected love story that had bloomed among its herbs and produce. Where a billionaire had fallen for the market employee, who had never been impressed by anything except the freshness of his basil and the sincerity of his heart.